Welcome to this deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today, we're pulling apart a really fascinating collection of writings.
Yeah.
Trying to get to the heart of something pretty profound, this idea of the way, the truth, and the life.
A central theme.
Our sources, they're quite varied. We've got passages from the Psalms, the Gospel of John, and also Paul's first letter to the Corinthians.
A good mix. Poetry, direct teaching, early church letters.
Exactly. And our goal, really, our sort of mission for this dive, is to try and understand what these texts are telling us about knowing God.
And not just knowing, right?
Sure.
But how that understanding might, shape how we actually live.
Precisely how it plays out. Okay, so where should we begin?
Well, that verse from Psalm 77 seems like a strong starting point.
Yes, Psalm 77.13. It says, "Your way, O God, is holy. What God is as great as our God."
Straight away, it introduces this concept, doesn't it? God has a way.
A specific path or maybe a manner of being, and it's holy.
Yeah, set apart, sacred, unmatched even. What God is great.
It immediately makes you think, okay, if God has this holy way, how do we connect with that? How do we understand it?
Right. It plants that question.
Yeah.
And that naturally leads into thinking about Jesus.
It does. We have this reflection piece that jumps right in. It says, Jesus is the way, the truth, the life.
Not just a way, but the way.
And the only way to the Father, it claims. Plus, it connects knowing Jesus directly with knowing God.
Which is a huge assertion.
And interestingly, it stresses it's not just about belief, like intellectual agreement.
No, it mentions doing God's works too, through faith and prayer. It's active.
So this reflection kind of bridges that gap, wouldn't you say, from the song's idea of a holy way to a person.
Absolutely. It grounds it in Jesus. And that exclusivity claim only path, that's a major statement.
Definitely. Which brings us squarely to John 14.
Where Jesus says it himself.
Verse 6, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father but by me." Wow.
It's incredibly direct. No ambiguity there.
Way, truth, life. It covers everything, doesn't it?
It really does. He's the path, the ultimate reality, the source of existence itself, all rolled into one.
And that phrase, "No one comes to the Father but by me."
That's the kicker, isn't it? The point that demands a response. It really narrows the focus.
You have to wonder how that landed back then, with all the different philosophies around.
Yeah. And then he immediately builds on it in the next verse.
Verse 7. "If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. Henceforth you know him and have seen him."
So knowing Jesus is knowing the Father. They're presented as inseparable.
It's like he's a perfect window, or maybe even a mirror. Look at me, you see the Father.
Exactly. Not just a messenger about God, but God revealed, which understandably prompts a question from one of the disciples.
Oh, Philip. Yeah. He pipes up in verse 8. "Lord, show us the Father and we shall be satisfied."
Such a human reaction. Just give us the proof. Let us see.
You can almost feel the longing there, but Jesus' response is quite pointed.
It is. Verse 9. "Have I been with you so long, and yet you do not know me, Philip? He who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father?"
It's like saying you've been seeing the Father all this time, through me.
Right. There's a gentle rebuke, perhaps,
Right.
but also a profound statement about his own identity. The revelation was happening right in front of him.
And he clarifies how in the next verse, doesn't he?
Yes, verse 10. "Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me?"
That unity again?
"The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works."
So the words, the actions, the miracles, Jesus is attributing them directly to the Father working through him.
It underlines that deep connection. He's acting in perfect sync with the Father's will and power.
It makes you think about those actions, those works, as direct expressions of God's character.
Precisely. And then comes this really quite startling promise.
Yeah, verses 11 and 12. "First, believe him because of his words or his works."
Right. Believe the unity based on the evidence.
And then, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me will also do the works that I do. And greater works than these will he do, because I go to the Father."
Greater works. That always stops you, doesn't it? What could be greater than the things Jesus did?
Exactly. What does that mean? Raising the dead? Walking on water?
Well, perhaps. And this is interpretation, of course. Perhaps it's not about more spectacular individual miracles.
Okay.
Maybe it's about the scope, the reach. Think about the message spreading across the world after Jesus ascended.
So the collective impact. Building communities of faith everywhere.
Possibly. Empowered by the Spirit, his followers would carry the work forward on a scale that, in terms of sheer numbers and geography, was greater. Just a thought.
That makes sense. And tied into this is prayer.
Yes, verses 13 and 14. Whatever you ask in my name, I will do it, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask anything in my name, I will do it.
The key phrase seems to be in my name.
Definitely. It's not like a magic formula, right?
No.
It suggests alignment, asking according to his character, his will, his purpose.
For things that bring glory to the Father through him.
Exactly. It's about the posture of the heart behind the request, reflecting Jesus himself.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. Let's bring in 1 Corinthians 15.
Paul's reminder. Crucial stuff.
He's writing to the Corinthian church, and he basically says, let me remind you of the absolute core gospel message I delivered.
The fundamentals.
Yeah. He lays it out. Christ died for our sins.
According to the scriptures. That's important.
Right. He was buried. He was raised on the third day.
Again, according to the scriptures, he grounds it in prophecy.
And then the appearances, this list of witnesses.
It's quite specific, isn't it? Cephas, that's Peter. Then the 12.
Then this group of over 500 believers at one time.
Wow, imagine that.
Then James, then all the apostles, and finally Paul says to him as well.
He presents it as historical fact, things that happened, things people saw.
And he even notes, back when he was writing, that most of those 500 were still alive.
Which is like saying, don't just take my word for it. You could theoretically go and check. It adds this layer of potential verification.
It really anchors the whole thing, doesn't it? This isn't just philosophy. Paul is basing it on these specific witnessed events.
It's the historical bedrock, as he presents it, for the claims about Jesus being the way, truth, and life.
Okay, so we have God's holy way, Jesus as the way revealed, and the historical events underpinning that claim. But there's another piece, isn't there? Another form of revelation.
Yes, Psalm 19 offers a completely different angle. It's about creation.
The heavens declaring God's glory.
Exactly. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night declares knowledge.
But then it says something fascinating. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard.
It's a silent testimony. Constant, universal, but nonverbal.
Yet, their voice goes out through all the earth. So creation itself is communicating something profound about God.
His existence, his power, his glory, it's always there, speaking without words. A witness available to everyone, everywhere.
I love the imagery later in that psalm. The sun like a bridegroom, like a strong man running its race with joy.
It's beautiful poetry, depicting the power and reliability, the sheer wonder of the natural order.
So how do we tie all these threads together? We've got God's distinct way from Psalm 77. We've got Jesus and John claiming to be that way, truth and life, the direct revelation.
Right, the personal embodiment.
We have 1 Corinthians grounding it in historical events, the death, burial, resurrection, appearances.
The foundational evidence, Paul would argue.
And then Psalm 19 showing this continuous silent witness of the cosmos.
Yeah, it's like different layers or dimensions of revelation, perhaps.
Could be.
You have the general universal witness of creation pointing towards a creator. You have the specific historical events concerning Jesus. And you have Jesus's own radical claim to be the personal living connection to God.
So Psalm 77 sets up the idea of God's unique nature. Psalm 19 shows it broadly in the world. John 14 gives the specific personal answer in Jesus. And 1 Corinthians gives the historical anchor.
That seems like a good way to synthesize it. They aren't contradictory, perhaps, but complementary ways God makes himself known. From the vast universe down to a single person making an exclusive claim.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then. The key takeaway seems to be Jesus presenting himself as this unique, personal way to know God.
A claim backed up, according to John, by his words and works, and according to Paul, by the historical events of his death and resurrection.
But alongside that very direct, very personal revelation, there's also this constant nonverbal broadcast from the natural world itself.
Yeah, testifying to God's glory and existence in its own way.
Which leads us, I suppose, to a final thought for you, the listener. We heard that question earlier from the reflection piece.
Right.
How might this whole concept, Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life, how might that specifically connect with, maybe inform your own sense of purpose or direction right now?
Yeah, what specific part of this whole discussion, the claims, the history, the creation testimony, what resonates most with you on your journey today? Something to ponder.